Good evening, everyone. I'm Abhirami, a visiting student from SRM University in India, and I'm here in Berkeley through the GLOW program offered by the Satarja Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology.
Hey everyone, for those of you who still don't know me, my name is Swetha Prabhakaran and I'm a freshman computer science major here at Cal. I have the distinct honor and pleasure of welcoming 3 very special guests today with Abhirami to the Newton Lecture Series. Christine Yen is a co-founder and engineer at Honeycomb, which is a startup that helps companies find and fix problems in their code by analyzing data. And yes, I'm simplifying that just a tad so that Christine can tell us all about the cool details. Before starting Honeycomb, Christine worked with a number of different startups, including Parse and Aardvark, which were later acquired by Facebook and Google respectively. Christine is an MIT grad, and I'm so excited to hear all about her work and adventures today. Our second panelist today will be Akash Garg. Akash is currently the head of driver engineering at Uber and was previously the senior director of engineering for Twitter's growth and international team. Akash also has a bit of an entrepreneurial streak. He co-founded the social networking site High Five, and he now mentors startups through the 500 Startups Accelerator. Now, Akash has a really unbelievable resume, and I'm sure he's going to have some super valuable insights for us today. But there's one little black mark. Actually, it's kind of a big black mark on his record. Akash graduated with a bachelor's and master's degree in computer science from Stanford, of all places. It's a bit of a tragedy, really. Like, you have to feel bad for the guy. But it's okay. We're all allowed to make mistakes sometimes. But never fear, Golden Bears. Akash will be joined on stage today by a graduate of our very own EECS department for our third panelist.
Amit Kumar will be talking to us about the importance of failure. Amit majored in electrical engineering and computer science from Berkeley and graduated within 3 years. His time at Berkeley was eclectic as he was the ASUC Senate, played for the Cal cricket team, and also was a part of the Indus cultural show. After graduating, Amit worked for Microsoft and soon became the company's leading software engineer. He started his first company, which turned out to be a failure. His second company, an online gambling social network, also failed. Keeping in mind the reason for his failure, he started his third company, CardSpring, an application programming interface that allows developers to create applications for credit and debit cards, which was Kumar's great success. After CardSpring was acquired by Twitter, Amit was approached by a venture capitalist for a position at Accel. He has been with Accel since 2016. All college rivalries aside, I think we're certainly here for a treat today, and here to be accomplished by 3 talented individuals. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join us in welcoming Christine Yen, Akash Garg, and Amit Kumar to the stage.
In the middle.
Well, that was a hell of an intro. Thank you. Christine, Akash, thanks for joining us. Everybody, thank you for being here. Today we're talking about a topic that I think isn't really talked about enough, and that's setbacks, mistakes, failures. But really the topic is resilience and kind of grinding it out, ending up on the other side. I think we're kind of used to this Instagram lifestyle, or seeing everybody's Instagram lifestyles about, what's going well. But behind the kind of shiny exterior, there's a much deeper journey, and I think it's something that we should be talking about. So maybe let's start with the shiny exterior. Christine, could you kind of tell us about your journey? And, right now you're the CTO of a Series A funded company, but kind of what's been your journey to get there through your career?
Yeah. So, hi, I'm Christine. Growing up, I always knew I wanted to be in computers. I was really lucky. And especially growing up in Silicon Valley, I remember Pixar was super cool and brand new, and I was like, all right, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to, I like being creative, I like being technical, I'm going to go to school, do computer graphics, and go work at Pixar. And I still remember that moment, senior year of college at MIT, after having picked my freshman advisor because he was the head of computer graphics at MIT, realizing that I really don't like linear algebra, I really don't like physics, and I really, really don't want to write another ray tracer. and being like, oh God, what am I doing? Like all of my plans up until this point have gone to waste. What am I going to do with my life? And I was like on the ground in front of my door in my dorm, just being like, what is going to happen? And life went on, and I realized there's still a lot of cool stuff out there that I could do with my CS degree, that I could stay very far away from linear algebra and physics, specifically everything involved in ray tracing, and started hanging out, paying attention to startups. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. I have worked at a couple different companies that have gotten acquired. I've also started a company that failed. And I think at each stage, my philosophy that I learned in school is you never really know what you want. You think you know what you want, but you're never really sure until you get there and you're like, am I enjoying this right now? Is this what I want to be doing? And so at each stage, instead of focusing too much on exactly where I'm going or what that will look like, I think more about what have I learned that I didn't like? What have I learned that I want to stay away from? And how can I minimize that to hopefully maximize the things that I will like? And that is why I am now working on a developer tools company, building tools for engineers to be better engineers and to build things that they care about.
Cool. Hey, thanks, Amit, and thank you all for having us here. Really great to come here and chat with everyone. Just a quick note, my wife did go to both for law school, so I'm not just biased towards one school. But in any case, great to be here. And my story, I think I grew up in Minnesota, and I think from an early age, I sort of knew that I wanted to do entrepreneurship. I was really into computers, so I figured, Silicon Valley is a great place to come and do that. And so I came out here in 96 and graduated in 2000. So that was right around the time Google was starting up. A lot of the Google kind of DNA was starting, kind of in and around Stanford. So I knew a lot of those folks, and was really interested in entrepreneurship. And so, I did end up starting a company a couple of years after school called High Five, which was a social networking site that ended up competing with MySpace and obviously Facebook and all the rest. It went through sort of every manifestation of founder story, startup story you can imagine, from the initial despair and having nothing to work to rapid growth to being a very hot company, getting a lot of funding, acquisition offers to the sort of bust, and kind of failing pretty miserably actually in many ways compared to where we thought we would go. So that was obviously a very humbling and interesting experience in also 8 years of my life, which tons of great learnings. And then, kind of following up after that, I ended up going to Twitter, and that was a fantastic experience. I think Twitter went through many ups and downs, a lot of learnings. Was fortunate to be there during the IPO and see that, pre and post experience, and that was amazing. And then a couple of years ago, 2.5 years ago, I joined Uber, and I've been there. And obviously, Uber, as you all know, has gone through a lot of press and its own turmoil over the last couple of years. So obviously a lot of learnings, a lot of interesting, pieces of things that, things I've learned that I think I'll carry with myself. But yeah, it's been great to kind of go through these different journeys of something very small to start up to, obviously a much larger company. And, I think it's all those experiences have all taught me different things. And yeah, it's exciting.
So I guess that's something we all have in common. We've started companies, very bluntly called failures. But maybe we could talk about that experience, right? Because, the first time you start a company, you're very optimistic. You feel like, this is my shot. This is my one, go at it. Maybe walk us through the journey of what you were feeling like when you started your company. What motivated you to start a company? How did you go about it? Like, how are you feeling kind of emotionally when you started?
I started my company when I was 22 going on 23, and this was 2011. So very different time. I had just come out of Aardvark, had just gotten bought by Google. I was kind of just in this mode of, I have nothing to lose. I'm young, I don't have kids, why not? Let me try something. And I had a friend who I seemed to get along really well with. She was a neuroscience major from MIT as well, had worked at a bank, and I was like, great. You'll be the business side. I'll be the technical side. It'll be fine. That's all we need. And we got into Y Combinator and worked on a company basically came up with an idea that centered around renting out venues for events. We were like, great, this is an inefficient market. We know from having organized a few events that the most painful thing is always figuring out where it's going to be held, locking that down, having that negotiation. We looked around and we were like, no one is posting their prices. This clearly must be because there's no way to post their prices, not because they don't want to. We did all the customer research, and we talked to event planners, we talked to venue owners, and all we could hear was like, they're doing this thing in this very silly way. And in retrospect, the thing that people kept telling us was, yeah, it sucks, but I have this friend that I always like giving a discount to, and when I see someone with a Facebook or Google email address, I like jacking up my prices. And I think the thing that slapped me in the face several times, and now I kind of have battle scars around, is I thought I knew everything, right? I was like, technology will solve everything. Here's a problem that is clearly only a technology problem. I have a technology hammer. It'll be great. And man, if I could go back to my 18-year-old self going into school and looking down my nose at the business school students, I would like smack her upside the head and be like, go take some classes. Don't disrespect that set of skills, because you don't know what you don't know. And it took that. The company ended up not ever going anywhere. We raised some money, ended up giving a bunch of it back because we couldn't make any money. And it was, it taught me to stick in domains that I know about or care about really learning about. It taught me that I really need to know, if I'm going to be working with someone closely, I need to know what they want out of it. This is also something that was kind of a mismatch. And it taught me that I really don't like being the only person writing software on a project. This is kind of lots of people do. I'm not one of them. I need someone to bounce ideas off of. And so taking those learnings and moving forward, in retrospect, it was a year of my life. Was it a failure? By some respects, yeah. But in other respects, I learned. And it was fun, and I didn't have anything to lose. And I also learned how cheaply I could live in San Francisco without making any income. So that was also nice. And, you get life lessons and you get career lessons out of it.
The co-founder thing is something I went through too at my first company, and I liken the analogy to going on vacation with a friend. And sometimes it turns out you suck at vacationing together because you just want different things. And that doesn't mean one person is good or one person is bad. It just means one person likes planning everything meticulously and one person likes flying by the seat of their pants. And it's just a mismatch sometimes. And I think the way you phrased it, like kind of understanding like what you're each looking for is like such an important thing that people don't do before finding co-founders. Akash, do you want to talk to us about your experience?
Yeah, I think, I think one of the things I remember very vividly when, I met my co-founder and, he was sort of thinking about some ideas around, doing, dating sites or social networking sites. And, shortly after joining, I remember going back to Minnesota over the Christmas break and, holed up in the cold, writing the first version of the website. And it was just very fun. I mean, you're building something. You're really the creative, person behind it, thinking about the feature set and what to build. And it was just, it was a very enriching experience. Now, it was very disappointing when we first launched it and nobody shows up. Of course, you have a site. How do you get people to actually come and use your product? So then you start to really be creative. But I think there's something very liberating about having sort of this freedom and sort of thinking about creative ways to draw users and customers to a product and iterating quickly and trying different things. I think that was one of the things I really enjoyed about that whole experience, where you could make decisions or try something without having to go through a lot of process or sort of overthinking it. You could sort of just try things and build, right, and ultimately create, which I think is one of the most rewarding things of startups. Whether they succeed or not is who knows, right? I think a lot of it is sometimes just it happens or it doesn't happen. But in any case, I think that initial experience was very fulfilling. I think you go through a lot of ups and downs. I think, honestly, the first 2 years, nothing happened. I mean, we were building things, but nobody was using it. Everyone's asking, what's your job? Like, what are you doing? Like, why aren't you doing something useful with your degree? And I think that you get a lot of that, right? And any successful founder in many ways has gone through this, period of just real, self-doubt and understanding, am I doing the right thing? Should I just go work at, a Google or Microsoft or something where it's safe? And so, and I had many of those thoughts too. It wasn't that I was immune to those. But I think what kept me going was the enjoyment of, hey, I'm building something here. It's, I'm learning a lot. I really believe in what we're building and why we're building it. So I think that helped carry it through. And then eventually we hit a break where we, started to get some traction, and from there kind of, ballooned up. But yeah, it was tough, and in 2 years is actually a pretty long time. So and so I think that was just it was an interesting period of time. But I was also young, and I didn't have kids or wife or anything at the time. So you do have more of a risk tolerance at that point.
So this is a question I've been asked often: is how do you know when it's time to quit? Right? I mean, this is a room full of hard-charging, persistent people who've typically not run into failure. In your case, you said after 2 years, there's a lot of self-doubt. How did you decide to stick with it? And Christine, for you, how did you know it was the right time to move on to the next adventure?
I'll let you start.
Yeah. So I think, that's a really great question of how do you know, I think for me, it was the fact that, I was going deep in a lot of areas that I hadn't explored before in terms of, different technology stacks and really understanding how to build. And that was actually really rewarding. I think the other thing that really helped was there was, I think, a good group of entrepreneurs that we got to know. We were in Soma at the time, and this is 2002, 2003. So there was actually a pretty close-knit group of folks that, we got to spend some time with, my co-founder and I. I just got a lot of inspiration from them, hearing their stories about failure and success. There's folks like James Hong from Hot or Not, John Abrams who started Friendster. And actually, we saw Friendster start to really take off, so that gave us some hope that if, John and Friendster could do it, that we also had a shot at making it in this field. So I think that really helped, just having this cohort of mentors or people you could, just jam with on ideas and just bounce, kind of. And there was this kind of founder community that, we got plugged into. So that actually I think was really nice because, to that point, we heard a lot of stories of failure and people persevering through some hard times. And so that was good to see, and I think that helped us sort of say, yeah, if we're enjoying this, let's keep going. Let's not call it quits too early. And internet blowing up, and these things are changing, so let's keep going.
I was not enjoying it, and I think that the magnitude with which I was not enjoying it was a big reason I stopped. One of the things they don't tell you, my Y Combinator class of 2011, a third to a half of the companies after demo day either lost a founder, changed entirely, spun down. These are things they're not publishing in the blog posts. But I saw that, I looked around, I kept going. But that I think established a baseline of this doesn't have to be, you don't have to be all in. You should be all in. But if you're not, that's okay, and it's a choice. I think I ended up sticking around for about a year, and by the end of that year, it was pretty clear to me that my co-founder and I had very different ideas of what sufficient success was. I was looking at the business, and I was like, we have no business. We have no path forward. We don't have the skills to make this happen. I don't want to gain this, right? You need to go pound the pavement. You need to go broker a bunch of deals, shake a lot of hands. I don't want to do that. And again, I was the only person, I was writing code until 4 a.m. every night, taking the last bus home from Muni. And I was just like, the things I would have to do to make this current iteration of the company successful are not what I want to do and not what I want to get better at, and will not make me more of the person that I want to be. If I had actually harbored, feelings about wanting to get better at sales or wanting to get better at shaking hands, maybe, right? That's the path forward. I do think I quit a little early, frankly. I think I could have pushed a little bit harder on my co-founder to be like, hey, no, let's together, let's change this. Together, let's do this thing different. And instead, I sort of just backed off and walked away. And I don't like to live life with regrets, but I consider that another learning experience. Again, looking at how you and your co-founder are talking, what they want, and how you advocate for what you want.
So, you're in YC. You're talking about having a cohort of peers. And I'm sure the students here can relate to having a cohort of peers and, hearing about their successes and hearing about the jobs they're getting or the internships they're getting or the clubs they're getting in. What was it like with your peer set when Friendster's taking off, and then obviously we'll get to you and talk about like what it was like to be in YC.
Yeah, I think, there's always going to be some element of, hey, this other person's doing something that, is awesome. And, obviously there's going to be some natural, sort of feelings of, maybe envy or, hey, I wish I was in that position. At the same time, you also, you connect with people on a very human level and realize that, everyone's having problems, right? Different types of problems, right? And so I think it's also just engaging in a dialogue where you can help each other out. So I think I remember a lot of sessions where we talked about some of the scaling challenges they were having on the technical side and just working through that. And that actually ended up being super helpful for us when we were hitting our scaling challenges later. But I think just connecting on that human level and understanding that there is no end, right? Like I think it's always sort of like an evolution, right? And there's always challenges. And, John himself went through a pretty tough spot with the whole founder, VC kind of battles that he had that are obviously very public. And, I think he's learned a lot from that. And, I think, so it wasn't the fact that it was a straight line for him or anything like that. So yeah, I think, people have successes and failures. And I think you just have to, have those connections because it's helpful and you can learn from each other. And, not getting in the, comparison game, right? Because everyone's going to be unique and different and there's going to be different people doing different things. And most founder stories are pretty non-linear and sort of random, and so there's no pattern necessarily you can apply to any one company or success story. That's pretty much true with most of the big tech companies today. Most of them were sort of pretty random in many ways.
I think for me, again, in retrospect, Y Combinator was almost like high school all over again. There were the cool kids that the teachers liked. I don't know, maybe that's not like high school, but there were the cool kids that the partners liked. And I was not one of them. And that almost made it more okay to be like, fine, partners don't like me. I'm not one of the favorites coming in. I'm just going to buckle down and prove them all wrong. I didn't. It's fine. But that sort of freed me from feeling like I had to engage in the pissing contest. Like each week at dinner, there'd be like, oh man, like how much did you raise? Oh, do you hear how much they raised? And especially being on the outside, I could look at that and be like, how much energy are you wasting posturing to these other people who don't matter? Especially, again, I look back at that cohort and the golden children, like, I don't know, they're not any more successful right now than I am. Very few of them are running companies or they've gone through a bunch of different things. And that sort of, oh, here's an arbitrary measure by which I'm going to say that I'm doing better than you. I'm glad I was freed of that early because I could just buckle down and focus on what mattered to me, which was at the time building my company. Now, Honeycomb, we're in a really crowded space with lots of other companies that are raising tons of money left and right. And if I had not learned back then that doesn't matter, and what matters is signing customers, making money, growing a team, and being able to move forward effectively, it'd be so much easier to get distracted. But things rise and fall so fast that just all you can do is kind of hold on and make sure you're on the right path.
So, you're kind of talking about contrasting your old experience with your new experience at Honeycomb. How did you decide to work with Charity? How did you meet Charity? What were Charity's our co-founder? Charity's amazing. How did you decide to work with her? And I went through a very similar experience. I'm really curious. What were the things that you did to verify that she was the one you wanted to work with? How did you go through that process?
Oh, I believe a lot in finding people who shore up your weaknesses. This is the big lesson I learned from the first company. And so I'm much more on the application, product engineering side. Charity has spent 2 decades of her life being on call, super hardcore infrastructure, database engineer, grumpy and hates everyone. And I worked with her at Parse for a couple years. And she and I got very close when we were at Facebook and we were both unhappy. And going into Honeycomb, it hit this sweet spot of this is a domain we both know, but we provide these different perspectives on the same problem, both of which will lead towards a better understanding of our target user. Again, our customers are both sort of, they they're across the spectrum of infrastructure engineer to product engineer. And I looked at her and I was like, okay, you are going to bring these things. You're going to make sure we can scale. You're going to make sure that we're speaking the right language to these folks. I'm going to make sure we're speaking the right language to these folks. And I'm going to make sure it feels good and looks and works well. And we spent a lot of time talking up front. We spent a lot of time talking about what success meant for us, right? Great. We say we're in it for the long haul. What does that mean? When will it be, like, what is failure for you? What is success? There's a conversation where she was like, everyone has a number. What's your number? Where you'd be done, and you'd be willing to like sign away your soul, or honeycomb soul. And that was like, I was like, I don't have a number. I just want to build something great. And I think even that, right, that idealism versus the pragmatism, that was a good sign to me that we were going to have that tension, that there was going to be someone watching out for that side. There's going to be someone else like pulling us forward. And frankly, we take turns being the pragmatist and the idealist. But there were a lot of conversations, a lot of coffee meetings, a lot of booze, and just being really honest with each other because we'd both seen things fail miserably where people are yelling at each other when they don't realize up front and they don't expose up front their tendencies and their preferences.
Do you think there's a self-discovery element of that too, in terms of understanding yourself better and kind of what those numbers are, what you are looking for? I mean, certainly for me, as I went through my companies, I think like one of the gifts of getting older, and there aren't that many, is that you kind of get to know yourself a lot better, and it's much easier to find alignment.
You know, I think I have learned a lot more about myself in the doing than the planning. Again, the planning, you can only plan as far as you can see the future. 2.5 years ago, like, we couldn't see the future. We could only see the stuff that we knew, and all of my growth over the last few years has been learning what I don't know, learning what I need to learn more of, learning which beliefs were oversimplified, and discount the nuances of, again, sales tactics or marketing techniques.
So, Akash, you went through a really long kind of experience at a startup, and then you went to Twitter, which is a completely different experience. How applicable were the lessons you learned? What were the lessons you learned? Did you do anything different at Twitter now that you kind of got a fresh start? Like, what did that look like? What did that process look like?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because I hadn't really worked at a larger, company other than doing my startup for a long time. So.
Oh, just for scale, how many people did High Five?
Yeah, so it's good. Yeah, so High Five, I think at our peak was like 125 employees, and I had a team of about 80, which was the engineering organization at the time in operations. So I had managed a pretty large, relatively large team. Twitter, when I joined, actually was about 450 people total. And engineering was maybe 200 odd people. It was a pretty flat organization at the time. And so, it still wasn't huge, right? You still kind of had a sense of who the people were, and we also had a couple of floors in Soma as well. I think, obviously Twitter at that time when I joined had about 90 million actives, or maybe like 70 million or something. And they were growing fast. Obviously, they were in the news, and they were kind of talked about quite a bit. And obviously Twitter had a lot more kind of structure in place than what we had at my previous company. So just adapting to understanding like how you do things, how you get things done. I think what helped me was just that sort of I didn't have any predisposed notions of what you could or couldn't do. So I was really just looking at the business holistically and saying, hey, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? Have we tried this? And just really, just thinking like an entrepreneur within the company. And I think it was a great time to be there because there was so much that was evolving and changing. And, essentially I, helped co-found the growth team, shortly after joining. And I think that was partly because I saw that there was a big need for really amping up how we were doing growth and thinking about growth at Twitter. So it was just about, coming into a place and just sort of applying the same things you did as an entrepreneur. Obviously, I didn't have the same role, that I had there. So you of course have to do some things more with influence and convincing and kind of evangelizing. But it's a good skill to learn, and it was a great experience, being there and doing that.
And what was it like to be? Well, I mean, I think it's kind of a two-part question, but what's it like being at Uber during some of the turmoil, or like Twitter during the turmoil? And I think there's a broader question here about kind of ours, I guess, tendency to tie our self-worth to the places where we work. Certainly when I worked at Twitter, at the time, it's like, oh, Facebook's kicking your ass. Who the hell uses Twitter? Blah, blah, blah. How do you disassociate that? And, how are you able to ride those waves?
Yeah, it's Twitter went through its share of turmoil, and then I think Uber had a different level of that turmoil. So I think maybe I was inured a little bit from Twitter, but then I got a whole different, I think, kind of intensity. And I think it hits you the most when you're sort of, hanging out with friends, or you're visiting or your family, and everyone's asking, hey, why is this in the news? What are they saying about this company or that company? And I think, so the way I kind of position that, or kind of think about that, is, do I believe in what I'm working on? Do I believe in the people I'm working with? Do I respect them? Do I feel like these are good people? And if the answer is yes, then I think you have to stay the course and really push for what you believe. I think Twitter has created a very unique product, and something that it does is, that does serve a very unique and singular purpose, I think, for the world. And I think I always believed in that mission, and felt that very strongly, and really respected and liked the people I worked with. And similarly with Uber, I think, obviously Uber is providing employment for 3.5 million people, and, there's a lot of positives to the business. Of course, there's some things that, we want to do better and could do better, for sure, no question. But you have to look around at the people you are hanging out with every day and working with, and asking yourself, hey, do I respect these people? Do I feel like we're working on good stuff? And you got to stay the course. And remember, people have very short memories, and the press tends to always over-amplify good and bad things, right? And so I think there's always going to be cycles of good and bad for any company. And so you just have to kind of remember that what matters is, can I continue to add value, to Christine's point, customers. You got to say, what are my customers doing? Are we serving them well? And if you do that, I think everything else will follow after that. But it can be tough. And so I think you just have to sort of remember why you're where you are, and sort of, be able to speak to the things that you believe in and value.
Christine, kind of a similar question. I think particularly as a founder, it's very easy to link self-worth to kind of how the company is trending. And how do you keep yourself sane? How do you disassociate yourself from kind of the cycles of winning and losing?
I have a dog. She's great. She helps me come home, and I remember that she will love me no matter what. This is something I'm not good at.
Yeah.
This is definitely something that I, especially transitioning from being just me and Charity, and like staring at each other, being like, how are we going to make this business work? Okay, what are all the things I need to do? We'll divide this up and we'll go for it. Transitioning from that to, we're now about 20-some people, being like, okay, we've hired a lot of really great people. How do I, instead of just jumping on the grenade myself, how do I empower them? How do I help them? How do I unblock them so that they can do what they're much better at than I am? I think, I don't know if I'm ever going to get good at separating my self-worth from what I'm working on or what I do day to day, but it helps to, like my dog, walk into the office and look at these amazing people that I'm working with, people I respect, people who have learned lots of things that I have lots of things to learn from, and remembering, okay, if nothing else, if everything else goes terribly, I will have had the chance to learn from these people and work with these people, and hopefully create an environment where they are proud, they're able to do work that they're proud of.
That's awesome. So I want to kind of transition to talking about how you evaluate people now as a leader at a company, and going through the hiring process and deciding who to add to your team, but maybe kind of a different lens on it. Did you feel like your mistakes, or like kind of High Five didn't work out necessarily the way you wanted it to, and certainly your company maybe didn't work out the way you wanted it to? Did you feel like it reduced opportunities for you? Do you feel like it enhanced opportunities for you? Because, obviously it's like, failure is glorified in the valley and whatnot. Like, how do you feel like it impacted you? Do you feel it's like a liability or an asset? I think it's more about the point of like trying things that are hard, trying things that are new, accepting failure, learning from it. Just curious what your lens is.
Yeah, it's a great question, because I think that's often, it's a valid, question, which is, oftentimes, and it's natural to sort of be, scared to jump into something new that you haven't tried before, because the failure and maybe the stigma of the failure could carry with you. And I think, I think in the Valley, I think it is true that people value folks who've tried something, tried something difficult, tried something hard, whether it's success or failure. And I think, while it doesn't feel good at the time, I think in my personal experience, I think both at Twitter and Uber, I think that experience, it helped me because I was able to think in a way that maybe was different than folks who had never started a company before. So I think that's one. And two, I think, certain people do really value that and are willing to give you different opportunities or present opportunities to you because they know you've tried something, you've kind of taken a risk, you've gone on a limb, and tried something kind of maybe sort of not atypical, and I think that really helps. I work with a really great person at Uber named Jahan. He was the founder of Sidecar. He actually kind of invented the ride-sharing business, and they got acquired by GM. He didn't last very long at GM because it was very bureaucratic and corporate, and came and joined Uber, and it's just been fantastic to watch him kind of operate within Uber and kind of really leveraging his entrepreneurial spirit. You may have seen we just launched a partnership with Jump Bikes. That was all him. That was something that he came up with and just pushed through. And so it's fantastic to see these people thrive in an environment where, that's supported and sort of valued.
I think we're very lucky to be in an industry where people are very tolerant of, you spent a year, you did some experiment, didn't work out. Cool. What'd you learn? I think that I don't think that it has been a hindrance much at all. Except, I see the pendulum swing the other way. Amit is telling me that all of you are here because you want to start companies. I think that the experience of working at a larger company where you can learn from a huge set of people around you, where you can make connections, where you can meet other people that you might start a company with in the future, I think that is undervalued. I left Google after being there for about 10 months. And have just worked at a series of fairly small companies. And I look at my friends who stayed at Google for 5-6 years before jumping off on their own, and they have a much larger set of people to pull from. Just working for a startup is great. Working on your own startup is great. Working at a big company is also great, especially if I assume that's how you guys met. You meet awesome people that you're going, they're going to go off and do something cool, you're going to go off and do something cool, and then you guys can help each other out again in the future. And it's something that, again, expose yourself to lots of different experiences, learn something different from each one, move forward.
Yeah, I definitely echo that. I think, starting out and working in a place where you can build your network early, I think it pays off sort of exponentially the dividends. And I think, learning, if you're a software engineer or product manager, you're learning the best practices from some of the best in the valley or the best in the industry. You're building great connections that then help you figure out what you're going to do next. And I think, looking back, it would have been fantastic to have kind of learned a lot of things that I sort of had to learn on my own. Prior to that. But, I think everyone has their own path. But yes, there's a lot to be learned at any of these, tech companies that are doing really well.
Yeah, and I think a lot of, when you're in school, you tend to think in very short-term cycles. Like when you're in high school, you think about getting into college. When you're in college, you think about your grades or getting the right job. But I think one of the things that, again, they don't tell you is that your career is like 30 years long. And so you should try to do forward-looking investments. You should try to build your networks, things that have those kind of exponential payoffs. Being in high-value learning situations, I think, is so critical. Okay, so I'm going to ask a couple more questions, and really I just want to open it up to the audience because I think it's a great panel. They have a wide variety of experiences, so I think you guys should get a chance to ask questions. But I did want to ask about hiring. So you're hiring, and if anyone needs a job, you should reach out to both of them, actually. But how do you kind of evaluate people, and do you look at, they're kind of, having a mixture of experiences, or do you like the person, it's kind of a softball question in that sense, do you just want the person who worked at Google for 10 years and is just won every step of the way, or what are the attributes you look for in people that you hire?
Yeah, I could take, I think if you look at kind of the generic interviewing process in the Valley, whether it's Facebook or Google or Uber or Twitter, I think a lot of them look pretty similar from a perspective of what they screen for in terms of technical competence and skills. When I interview candidates myself, specifically, what I'm looking for is something that the candidate's really passionate about and something they've gone deep into. And that could be something, very related to the domain, but also could just be a hobby that they're really passionate about. And just looking for something that they've noticed in the world, that they've taken a pause and sort of gone deep in. And I think I'm looking for that because I want them to sort of come here and find that sort of passion and go deep, because I think that's where you get the 10x or the 100x ROI from this person's work or that person's enjoyment of the job, right? And so I'm always looking for that spark. And I think that's one, assuming they have the rest of the skills, that for me is really important, especially if we're looking for leaders and managers. I think they need to really, have a point of view in the world and have some passions that are are deep and grounded in something that really speaks to them.
To bring this to the very other end of the spectrum, Honeycomb has grown by managing to hire very senior folks. And what I mean by this is Charity and I started the company both having been kind of burned out, kind of jaded, kind of grumpy about hiring processes at companies like this. Right? Like we had gone through acquisitions and seen the people that were hired into our companies and looking at them being like, wait, this is not who we would have hired if we were an independent company. This person has a completely different set of values. This person has a completely different set of things than we were looking for. And so as we have grown Honeycomb, and this is starting to change a little bit now, but very early on, we were like, okay, the thing that matters the most is that you care, you're aligned, you're in this for the same reasons that we are. When we're 3 people, 4 people, right, that means you desperately want this product to exist in the world. You recognize that we're here to make money. Sorry, startup is not, an experiment where you get to throw parties all the time on VC money. It is
a lot of parties.
Sometimes it is. I don't know. Our company, we're here to make money. We're here to build a business. We're here to figure out how to build something worthwhile for people to pay for. We had to kind of set a set of those things. We believe in everyone doing support. We believe that no one is too good to talk to customers. Like all these sorts of things were very particular to us. But because we knew that that sort of person, that these things mattered, it let us be really explicit when we were talking to someone. Hey, this is what matters to us. If it isn't a match, it's fine. It's not bad on you. It's not bad on us. It's just not a match. You should go do what matters to you. And again, the sidebar of being on the opposite end of the spectrum, being very small, being very senior, we were just kind of like, we need people who can operate in chaos and forge their own path. We need people who can deal with the fact that we have no processes and we have no, everyone sort of just makes decisions and sort of talks about it and moves forward. And again, we're slowly getting better about this and moving away from it. But that was another thing that is not going to show up on a Google hiring rubric. But it is something that was important for us at the company, at this company, at the stage that we were at. And so when students go interview for companies, I hope you think about the sorts of things, the sorts of environment that works for you. How you like to learn, how you like to work with people, how you like to be, do you like to be told what to do? Do you like to figure out what to do? And these are all the questions that you should ask, because that's what's going to determine your happiness in the end.
So I'm guessing you don't ask people what their GPA was back in college.
No, we have actually quite a few college dropouts. Yeah.
I don't encourage anyone to drop out. Everybody stay in school.
Sorry, right.
Okay, so maybe we can open it up to the audience and just kind of stand up and tell us your name, and we'll go from there.
Hi, I'm Rashawn. So, Christine, Akash, thanks so much for coming tonight. I wanted to just ask, I know this is a bit short notice also, but looking back, doing some self-reflection, what are some of the most important qualities and traits that you each have that have made you successful?
I don't think I'm successful yet, honestly. And I think that's actually probably the quality that works in my favor, is that I'm wired in a way where I do this because I love it, because I've gotten better at identifying. I think Christine's journey resonates a lot with me, but gotten better at identifying what I'm good at and where I get energy from, and just kept moving in that direction. And then I think good things start to happen.
I have a giant chip on my shoulder. And I use it to drive me forward. Ever since, every time someone looks at me and is like, oh, you couldn't possibly be doing what you're doing, or you couldn't possibly be good at that, I just want to turn to them and be like, you're wrong, and I'm going to show you that you're wrong. It makes me a lot of fun at parties. But, it helps, right, with ignoring the echo chamber, ignoring what other people are doing. I have a thing I'm pushing forward, and I push it forward.
Yeah, I think for me, it's sort of this notion that, anything, out there, especially now with the internet and all the courses, is pretty learnable, actually. And I think just not being afraid to start and really go deep. And I think I notice this especially nowadays in technology, and something that I talk to folks at Uber and even when I was back at Twitter a lot, which is there's this notion of like sort of ultra specialization that occurs for some reason where I see this coming up a lot, which is somebody identifies as I'm an iOS engineer or I'm a front-end engineer, I'm an infrastructure engineer, and those are all true statements in that somebody developed expertise in a particular technology. But what I tell people is like, well, if you're an engineer and you understand the principles, you should be able to pick up and be excited about learning new things if it's what's required, kind of your typical full stack notion. And so I think just having this sort of ability to sort of like try something. You may fail, you may be bad at it. I mean, we were just talking earlier about skiing and snowboarding. If you know one, maybe you don't know the other. It's pretty painful to try to learn the other skill, but it's actually, I think, the most rewarding thing you can do is diving deep into something. And sometimes engineers tell me like this will take me 2 weeks. I challenge them back. I'll write it faster than you. I don't know anything about it, so I'll do that because I don't believe it's unlearnable. I think if somebody puts their mind to it, they can do it.
You must also be fun at parties.
Yeah, exactly. I'll beat you.
Yeah, I would also caveat that with when we were in college. I think we're close by anyways, but there was no iOS, there was no iPhone, there was no machine learning, there was no crypto, there were no containers, AWS didn't exist. And so if you're not able to pick up those new skills, like particularly in engineering, you're going to be out of a job very soon, or you're going to be irrelevant very soon.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, more questions. In the back. Yes.
All right. I mean, obviously, I think I can't speak for Honeycomb, but companies like Uber, specifically have lots of different roles. Ranging from business, product, operations, etc. And so, engineering is one obviously large discipline within Uber, but I think all of these companies are looking for folks who are entrepreneurial, who are looking to learn more about business or product. I would say there's less openings per se because engineering is generally the largest function in most of these organizations. But certainly, if people are interested in learning about things, happy to chat more or email me later.
We just hired 2 new account executives last Monday. We are currently looking for a marketing person, maybe with a couple years experience. Sorry. So I love this topic because one of the things I've learned very strongly over the last 2 years, again, I've mentioned this a couple of times, I had no idea what I did not know about sales, especially enterprise sales, B2B sales, technology sales. In my mind, I was like, oh, we're selling to people just like me, right? Oh, I know that all I need to know. At the end of 2016 was our end of our first calendar year, really, of being incorporated. And I was like, okay, we have this customer. They verbally told us they're gonna pay us $1,000 a month. This is awesome. I'm going to bring in revenue. I'm going to bring in revenue 2016. So I went online and created a Stripe account. I remember this is 3 a.m. on the 28th because I was like, it's going to happen in 2016. I found easyinvoices.com and I created an invoice and I sent it off to this person being invoice for $1,000 a month to Honeycomb. I felt very proud of myself. And the next morning I get an email from this customer being like, what am I signing? What am I agreeing to? What comes along with this money? And it just didn't occur to me, and I just didn't know master service agreement and terms and conditions I knew, but I didn't know all the pieces that went into that. And I think that there's a huge industry emphasis on engineering is the best and all that matters, but really building a business takes all these different parts. Building a business takes all these different things, and the best businesses are ones where the different pieces learn from each other and are open to each other. So folks who are not engineers, I hope you find the engineers who are open-minded and are like, oh yeah, I need your skill set, you need my skill set, let's work together. And engineers, I hope you are all open to, again, not falling into the trap that I fell into, which was every problem can be solved with technology, because sometimes it can't. Sometimes you need a handshake.
Great. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Swetha. So a topic that we have talked about a lot in this class is the idea of startup teams having a clutch, a brake, and an accelerator. Basically the idea of one founder who kind of drives things forward, one who's a little bit more cautious, and then the person just kind of amplifies each of those voices. I'm curious as to what roles each of you have played in your different startups, and if you feel like your role has evolved through your career.
Yeah, actually, I was thinking that's a great question. I think one of the things that both my founder and myself at High Five sort of believed, both of our parents are small business owners, entrepreneurs, and so we were operating the company very much in the notion that, hey, we'll build a profitable business, we'll not necessarily look for VC money or try to get too big, and we got to, I think, we raised money from my dad and my co-founder's dad, and we got to 10 million in revenue and 50 employees before we touched any institutional money. And I think the big mistake we made was we didn't put the accelerator on earlier, right? Because our costs were going up, hiring was expensive, Facebook and MySpace, and all these people were raising money. So I didn't know Amit at the time, and when we finally did raise money,
I didn't have any money at the time.
Exactly. But when we did raise money in 2007, it was like everyone talked to us, and we got tons of term sheets, and it was awesome. But we could have done that a year and a half earlier, and it would have really helped. And having also the discipline of having a board and all that kind of stuff, like we didn't know about that. We've never seen that play out. So I think having like a strong board and an investor you really trust and you are aligned with, it's just like finding another co-founder in many ways. And so I think if I'm in the entrepreneurial, boat again, who I raise money from, who I work with, I think is going to be very important. And I think that was something that I think we both almost played too much of the brake, and we needed, I think, an accelerator to push us.
I think I was also a little bit more of a break, and this is something I'm working on because I can see it in like various jobs I've had, various startups. I'm always in that mode of like, oh, it's not ready yet. Oh, it needs to be a little bit more perfect before releasing it. And in this mode, like, kind of like what you were saying, when you first start out, you spend 2 years working on something. You're like, okay, it's perfect now. And if no one cares, then like, would people have really cared that it wasn't quite perfect a year ago? And I would love my role to change. Working on it.
I don't think I've quantified it in those senses. I don't know that there was like a break, the break where that no one cared about our company. That was the break. That's what broke. I would say I kind of believed more in the Christine answer that she gave us earlier, where it's more about finding complementary skills rather than being like, well, I'm going to be very aggressive and you're going to be very conservative, And so at my second company, I was very much about, driving the product and engineering forward. And my co-founder was the most exceptional fundraiser and kind of vision setter that I've ever met. And we were both very good at team building. But I think, what you really want to do is understand what you're bad at. So when I hear that is like, if you're a company that keeps shipping product maybe too early or, racing ahead and it's all broken, maybe you should find someone who helps build out a better process, right, at your company, a better engineering process. Or if you're not really shipping product because, and I've made this mistake. I went in the cave for 2 years and then came out with the tablets, from on high and no one gave a shit. And, then maybe you need someone at the company who's gotten a lens from other experiences and understands how to push forward and build a more iterative process. Go ahead.
Hey, Russ, third-year business student here, and I guess my question to you guys is, as you started to experience success in your various industries, how did you manage personal relationships as well as dealing with staying grounded as you began to experience success?
I mean, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, so the question was, and this is Russ, a third-year business student, and he said, how did you manage your personal relationships as you started to find success? Was that a fair? I mean, I could start. I would say that, well, fortunately in my case, I had a lot of failure before I had any semblance of success, and so you tend to get rid of the people who are only around you because they think you're going to do great things, and you surround yourself better with the right people, who are supportive, who like you no matter how well you're doing, who are, I really believe the 5 people you surround yourself the most with, you get habits from them, right? And so I wanted to surround myself with people who were not complacent, who pushed themselves to do better, but were good people, and I think, certainly there are people in this room who are going to find success very early in life. But I would say that everyone in the room will struggle at some point. Everybody in the room will have failure at some point. Everybody's, I made this joke earlier, but it may be in poor taste, but we're not at Stanford, are we? I didn't get into Stanford, right? That's the truth, isn't it? That we all have run into things that didn't go the way we wanted. And so it's just important to surround yourself with the people who help shape the kind of person you want to be, but also like you for you.
I interpreted this question very differently than you did. And I kind of made a face, a laughing face when you asked this question, because I am also not good at personal relationships outside of work. This is a thing where my default is just to throw myself and all of myself into work. That first startup, I was not hanging out with friends. I was in the office from like 10 a.m. until 4 a.m. every day. I went to the gym by myself from 1 to 3 a.m. because 24-hour fitnesses are actually 24 hours. Mm-hmm. But like, I didn't see anyone. I didn't really talk to anyone. And now, many years later, with a dog and a boyfriend who makes me come home, and at least work from home, I'm realize like I can see the difference in my I'm much less likely to snap at people if I have dinner with a friend, just to like vent, right? Or I start to appreciate the friends in my life who are not in tech, where I can talk and we can share experiences and we can learn from, like, oh wow, you're having a similar problem in a totally different environment. What can I learn from that? What can I tell you about what I'm doing? And so I'm super grateful for the friends who put up with me during the time when I was like, no, I can't hang out with you, I've got to work. Because now on the other side a little bit, working on it, they're the ones who help keep me sane and help remind me that, like, hey, let's go to the beach, or let's go walk our dogs, because it will be good for us and our brains to relax.
Yeah, no, I experienced it very similar. When doing your startup, it is all consuming, all encompassing, and I think, a couple of things there. One, I didn't appreciate having that balance. And my wife and I started to date actually right around the time I started the company. But she was a Bolt, so she was very busy. So we were both very busy for a number of years. So that was fine. We were both doing our thing. But as we started, we got engaged and we got married in 2006. I look back and I realized, I didn't spend as much time as I could have or should have. And part of it was also just learning how to delegate appropriately, right? Because when you build this thing and you're getting traction, it was very hard for me to let go and sort of say, okay, now this team's going to manage this. I'm going to be off the on-call rotation or off the sort of key decisions. And I think I could have done that way better now in retrospect, which would then have given me space to spend time with family, spend time with friends, and actually having that time to unwind and really reflect. And so I had my son in 2009, and I think everything changes after that, because when you have a kid, obviously you're kind of there and you want to spend time. So today I'm very particular about I'm home by a certain time. If I need to work later, I can, but I want to spend time with my family in the night. And my other routine is I get up. I'm usually at work, probably one of the first people there at 8:15. First 2-3 hours are very productive. Nobody's bothering me. I have no meetings. I just get a lot of stuff done. Then I have maybe a bunch of meetings till like 5, and then I go home. And it's actually I'm very productive, way more productive than I ever was, right? And the number of hours you work isn't really the important thing. It's the productive, kind of core hours. And I realized it's really important to have that balance and routine. And now you're starting to see people are remote. Like, I have teams in Seattle and New York and Amsterdam and India. People are all over the place. And so you have to be able to adapt and work when it makes sense, and not necessarily be physically in the office all the time with people. And I think that's also important with your family, scheduling time to really unwind and unplug. I think now it's hard. We all have our phones attached to us 24/7. So, I'm purposely trying to, unplug or put that away when I get home. But it's hard. I wish I could do better. I'm not quite there.
More questions? Vicky.
I'm wondering if you can each tell a little bit of the story about how you got the idea for your either most successful or favorite startup.
All right, fine, I'll start. So after a couple of failures, I kind of realized that startups are hard, and you're more likely to fail than not. And so I decided to try to stack the deck in my favor as much as possible. And so one of the things I did was I went back to the venture capital firm I liked the most, and I paired up with an EIR, which is called, it's a short name for Entrepreneur in Residence. And essentially Entrepreneur in Residence has this kind of a handshake, soft handshake, that they're going to be funded by the VCs. So I thought, at least I'll take the funding risk out of this situation and work with a great venture capital firm. And so Eckert Walter was his name. Eckert and I, and a couple other people that we had join us from my previous company, we kind of brainstormed, and we were thinking about what are the prevailing trends of the day. And in 2010, August, the prevailing trends of the day were, Stripe had just gotten into YC, Square had just done its Series A and hired Keith Raboy. Groupon is the fastest growing company of all time. And so we knew that we wanted to do something in kind of the intersection of payments and advertising and really kind of retail advertising. And so we started to toy around with the idea of kind of a smart credit card and what would a smart credit card look like? And, what if we could port some of the mechanisms that have been so successful on the internet to the real world? And so we kind of iterated on this idea of what would a cookie look like. A cookie is kind of just like a piece of data that a website drops on your machine so that they can give you a more personalized and tailored experience next time. What would that look like if that was kind of married with a credit card? And that's kind of how we started. We were wrong. We did that for about 9 months. We didn't get paid. We built a bunch of things that no one cared for, and we kept listening and learning, and eventually we got to a place where they did start caring, and we ended up building CardSpring.
Honeycomb came out of Charity and I both being at Parse, getting bought by Facebook, and being exposed to the very wide variety of internal tools that Facebook has. One of the things that happens when you get acquired is the big company looks at the small company and goes, "You're so cute. You have tiny company problems. All of our big company tools will solve all of your problems." In most of the cases, they're wrong. But this one tool was called Scuba, and really, really dramatically changed how we were handling problems at Parse. Parse you can think of as like a mobile backend for mobile apps, or a Heroku for mobile, whatever. What it meant is that we had literally 1 million different apps using us as their backend, doing different things, doing crazy things. Some games, some like productivity apps, everyone doing something different, and it was all being sharded across a set of our databases. And at any given time, something could be going wrong, and we would have to figure out what was going wrong, why, who was doing it, how to stop them from doing it, or at least how to stop them from hurting us. And the change that we saw when we got to Facebook, when we had this tool that suddenly let us work with log data in a very different way, changed dramatically the way that we did this problem. So this is a little more in Charity's realm. While I was there, I was working on Parse's analytics products, and I was building a bunch of analytics tools for our app developers to see what was going on with their apps. And repeatedly, they would write in and be like, "Hey, I'm looking at this graph. What does it mean? Why did it go up? Can you tell me more?" And I would have to end up going back to this tool that we were using internally to be like, "Oh, yeah, okay, that's what this means. Let me break this down for you in some other way." I left Facebook not thinking about what's next, just being burned out and needing a break. And when Charity left Facebook, some folks were like, "Hey, are you going to start a company?" She looked around and she was like, "Well, I don't know if I really want to start a company, but wherever I go to be an engineer, I'm sure this tool that changed my life will be there, right?" And she looked around and she's like, "Oh, no, it's not. This thing doesn't exist." And she reached out to me, and I had not meant to do another startup. Like this thing in the past, this YC thing, had taught me so strongly, unless all of these things fit together, it's going to be rough. You might have a bad time, and it might just be a year of painful learning. But it was just this perfect intersection of the tool that we had both used and seen be successful, seen work for a bunch of different teams inside Facebook, that we were like, man, think of all the companies out there who don't know they need this. And kind of just this personal interest in building this tool. I love analytics tools. I love pulling signal out of noise. I love all of this. And it was almost like a chance to do it right. Oh, great. I built a bunch of analytics tools from this old understanding of what people needed. Now I've seen the light, and now I can bring the light to the rest of the industry.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that the thing you mentioned, where sometimes, in a company, you're building or investing in technologies, and oftentimes you see folks taking those ideas and bringing them forth. And I think at Twitter, Flo was actually on my team. He started Mesosphere because, Mesos was something we used, a lot of Twitter, and he saw that other people could use it. Will Morgan, who I think Amit and I worked with, started Buoyant, which got funded by Benchmark, which is doing service mesh technology. Larry did Envoy. There's all these companies that, I think, spin out of these companies when they have an internal need and they kind of go out there. So I always tell people, hey, look at the tool set that we're using at Uber. and you will be shocked at how many things are still not solved, out there. Everything from, we just went through like HR cycles of promotions and comp. There's nothing out there. Everything's custom built with Google Sheets, and it's all crap. So if anyone wants to start a company, I think Workday's got some real deficiencies. But in any case, there's plethora of opportunities. So I think that's a great way when you're like living through it and it's painful. You're like, why? Everyone's like, why isn't there a tool? So trust me, the biggest companies on earth have lots of need. So that's one. I think two, for me personally, I think when we were doing High Five, I think we also we were never super wedded to one particular product or idea. We just knew that the internet was really coming online and photos and people's access was really booming. So we want to just be in the space so that if we saw an opening, if we saw something that was a gap, we could move quickly. And that's kind of what happened, because we started more as a dating site and then pivoted more to social networking as that became sort of a popular thing and people were more on email and photo sharing was really coming online. 03, 04, photo sharing wasn't that prevalent. Flickr was there, but it wasn't as prevalent as, obviously today. It's crazy. So yeah, I think it was just more being opportunistic. You have a team, you have a product, and you're able to pivot quickly. But if I were to look at it today, I would sort of do a similar thing if I were to brainstorm. At least on the enterprise side, there's just a lot, amazing number of gaps that you'd be shocked when you have a 3,000 person engineering team at Uber and you're still like building simple tools that should be solved, right? It's amazing. Like you would be shocked.
More questions? Go ahead.
Thank you guys both for coming here. My name is Alex. I'm a master's student in industrial engineering operations research. So you both touched on evangelizing, Christine, either through selling B2B and having to convince these big companies that you have the right product for them. Akash, at Twitter, building a new able to evangelize within the company. How did you maintain your enthusiasm and belief that you could convince these huge companies with so much inertia to actually change?
For us, this is an ongoing challenge as we continue to sell and as we continue to evangelize. I think really what helped, besides my personal amazing reservoir of fortitude, whatever, is having seen this thing exist. And this is something that, and a huge advantage we have over a lot of companies that I acknowledge and I'm grateful for. We saw Scuba grow inside Facebook. Scuba was built to serve a very small internal need, which was to basically help track down MySQL performance regressions. Something that was built by this back-end team, never intended for any other team to use. And it just grew, and it just grew, and there were just certain choices that they made that made other teams want to be like, hey, that seems aggressively unpleasant to use, but also really useful. And so I think there is this conviction still, we might be wrong, who knows, there's still this conviction that other companies will have similar problems. And there's a lot of convincing people that, hey, re-examine your assumptions, re-examine what you think, how you think the world is. And, this is, again, why I'm like, expose yourself to lots of different people, expose yourself to lots of people who think differently, because the ability to hear someone really talk about their problems and be like, aha, that thing, that's my in, is a real skill and very valuable.
Yeah, I think when you have a firm belief or a strong belief in something, to Christine's point, just pushing through and having sort of a, just almost an irrational sort of, kind of conviction that you're going to make it happen. And I think sometimes it requires taking some risk, and really stepping in and standing for what you believe. I think at Twitter, for example, I think there was, a period of time where the company was pretty conservative in its approach to product and how we did engineering in some ways. And there's some benefits to that, of course, but I think it also didn't allow the company to innovate as quickly as it could. I think I particularly remember that there was sort of this aversion towards expanding kind of our mobile teams. I think there was maybe 8 people on the mobile team and a lot of conviction on why would we ever need more than 8 mobile engineers? Everything's, people, it was amazing, right? And so I didn't believe that. So I really pushed on making that happen. And, it was sort of against maybe the will of some of the more senior folks, but I just did it because I said this is the right thing, and ultimately we were proven right. But sometimes you have to take a little bit of a risk, maybe counterintuitive to what is happening around you with folks. And I think, I think Uber, as a contrast, I think it kind of encourages that more, which is like questioning and sort of pushing the boundaries. And definitely an environment that I like in that sense, because you're sort of expected to do that more than not. So just every company has their own kind of way of looking at things.
Yeah, I would also tell you that certainly some decisions are taken top down, but you'd be surprised the amount of initiatives and releases that are pushed from the bottom up, where a group of product managers, engineers, business people, operations people get together and believe in something and actually push it forward. And that's typically actually how a lot of things happen. And I think that's why a lot of tech companies now do hackathons, right? Because in a way, it's a good laboratory to actually encourage that. And I would say 25% of Twitter's features have been prototyped in a hackathon, have been refined. Twitter Moments, Conversation View, TweetStorm, all these things, they all came out of hackathons.
I think this also ties back to a couple things that we've said about finding someone who balances you. Because the worst moments are when you're like, man, I've spent all this time building this thing. Does anyone care? And for me, myself and Charity, we take turns, right? Being like, yes, people care. I was talking to this other person the other day and they, their life sucks and they really want our solution. And then the next day, she'll be saying that and I'll be saying that. You just finding someone that balances you and can be alternately optimistic or pessimistic depending on what your partner needs and what the company needs. It's just the balance.
And building a movement or building consensus around whether it's an idea or a company is really what the game is about, right? And being able to rally people behind you, whether it's a change in hiring procedures, whether it's, employee resource group, right? A women engineering group. It's really just the people who are involved who are pushing that forward, who are getting the resources, who are making it happen. That's how those things happen.
I know there are more questions, but I'm wondering if we can do that as a one-off with people coming up.
Perfect.
You all were phenomenal. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.